Mr. Minister, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. There are two more interesting panel discussions to follow. The first panel will address cybersecurity, a global topic that has become a growing challenge and today affects everyone's daily life, both privately and at work. It therefore requires not only a national but also an international response. The second panel will be devoted to the future of Western Balkans and the importance of enhancing trust in regional cooperation. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a real pleasure to welcome such a esteemed panel on cybersecurity and its moderator, Mr. Uri Rosenthal, the former Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Kingdom of Netherlands and a special envoy at the Dutch Foreign Ministry, who is in charge of preparation the fourth International Cyberspace Conference to be organized in the Netherlands next year. Mr. Rosenthal, please.
I hear a lot of cracks here, but it's understandable from the back, yes? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome you on my part on this panel on cybersecurity. And let me say that when we talk about cybersecurity, we can expand it to a more broad concept of the cyberspace. And I don't tell you anything spectacular when I would say that cyber is by now actually penetrating and affecting all aspects of our lives. And if that counts for the older generation, it counts a fortiori for the younger generations, which already learn with and about cyber and etc. in the elementary schools. Also here in Slovenia, as I heard from your Minister Pikalo. Cyber issues are therefore becoming increasingly central to global security and stability. And we are facing the complex realities of today, where cyber tools empower both states but also non-state actors, and sometimes in order to challenge the states. So talking about cyberspace, cybersecurity, is also talking about cybercrime, misuses of cyberspace, etc. At the same time, let's not forget about the enormous pros and advantages and spectacular challenges of the internet on the positive side, of the cyber on the positive side. In many parts of the world, and also here in Central Europe, I hear a lot about the potentiality of the internet in the sphere of not only education, but also, for instance, health and other parts of our modern life. Now, when we talk about the challenges, I would say that the international community should be, or should become strong enough to get the position to present a comprehensive and coherent response to the challenges in the cyberspace. And there we are talking about the balance. Yesterday in the plenary panel on the philosophy of leadership, I made a remark that I like those who are talking about checks and balances. And in the cyberspace we see the same. We see the need for a balance between freedom, security, and not to forget economic growth - social development. And I would say that looking at the Bled Strategic Forum, ladies and gentlemen, we see a prime example of how we can indeed exchange views on the global challenges with regard to cyberspace, from a perspective of balancing the several parts of the story. Let me say in advance that the Netherlands will organize in April next year the Global Conference on Cyberspace 2015, where we will sort out things and will try to get to concrete deliverables. Let me, for this moment, now get to the panel. This is a panel of extremely distinguished participants in the world of cybersecurity, more broadly said, international security and what have you. And let me introduce these panelists. First, I would like to introduce Mr. Ambassador Zoran Dokaru, the NATO Assistant Secretary General for Emerging Security Challenges. He is responsible for the providing of support to the North Atlantic Council and for advising directly to the Secretary General on the evolution of emerging security challenges and their potential impact on NATO's security. In a preliminary talk I had with Mr. Dokaru, I already noticed that he has quite something to tell here to the audience and to the other panelists. And that the day before he has to be in Wales for the NATO summit. On my left side, nobody less than Ambassador Wolfgang Ischinger, who's the chairman of the world-famous Munich Security Conference. Yes, it is. World-famous. And he is also the global head of governmental relations of Allianz in Munich. We have on my right side Mr. Roman Jakič. He doesn't need introduction to at least the Slovenian part of the audience, but also to the others. He is the Minister of Defense of this beautiful country. He was the chair of the National Assembly Committee on European Union Affairs until he was appointed in the present position. Then we have Mr. Ulrich Martinu, who is the Deputy Director of Europol in a beautiful building in The Hague. It is, isn't it? Yeah. And Mr. Martinu has been Deputy Director of Europol since the 1st of November 2011, and he directs the Governance Department and the Subdivisions Cabinet, Corporate Services and Security, so 3 of the subdivisions. We have furthermore Mr. Steve Purser, on the extreme right of my part, which is not to say anything about his political ideas. He is the head of Core Operations Department, ENISA. And Mr. Purser is also a member of several steering boards and advisory committees, including notably the steering board of the CERT EU. For those who are not familiar with these acronyms, EU you will know, CERT is Cyber Emergency Response Team. And then he is also a member of the program board of the EU Cybercrime Center. Okay? Then we have, next to him, Mr. Zoran Stančić, Deputy Director General for Communications Networks, Content and Technology of the European Commission. From 2000 to 2004, he was State Secretary for Science at the Ministry of Education, Science and Sport here in this country, in Slovenia. And then till 2009, he served as the Deputy Director General of the European Commission, Director General Research. Then we have Mr. Mihály Zala, who is the President of the National Security Authority of Hungary, and he established the Cyber Defense Management Authority within the National Security Authority, which now plays a predominant role in the protection against and the prevention of cyber threats. And also he takes care of the coordination of the mechanism of the measures taken in the case of an attack, whether at national or international level. Mr. Zala is from Hungary. Hungary is part of the so-called London process, which brings us next year to The Hague. And of course, when we talk about Hungary, we know about the Budapest Convention of 2003 on cyber. Well, that's it, as far as the panelists are concerned. The sequence of the session today, ladies and gentlemen, will be that the panelists get the opportunity to give a short comment right from their heart and their brains on this issue, on this subject. And they will keep it to 5 minutes, strictly 5 minutes. If it's going over the 5 minutes, they are cut off. Then afterwards, I will ask the panelists, and you have to be patient then for a moment, to comment on each other's messages. And afterward, the floor is all yours. And we will have questions and answers in this panel. Now, I would like to start on my right side with Mr. Jakič. The floor is yours for 5 minutes.
5? Thank you very much. Good afternoon to everybody, hopefully, and thank you very much for inviting me. Congratulations to the organizers of this strategic forum. We're really proud of it. So concerning the information and communication technology, I don't need to explain that they have significantly basically changed our lives and have to some extent become the backbone of our society. So a change for the better with enormous social benefits, but also a change connected to greater security risk and challenges. Cyberspace is increasingly becoming a space of abuse by a number of actors with different interests, so economic, political, military, and others, and the impact, the frequency of it, and also the sophistication of cyber attacks are growing very much. So additionally, the identification of perpetrators of the attacks and the question of attribution are not getting any easier. So the possible damage effects on the modern critical infrastructure are some of the main factors leading us in our deliberation on cybersecurity at the national and international level, but being also keen to defend the free internet, I would like to say that at the same time such efforts need to be balanced with preserving individual privacy and free use of internet. Most certainly cyber threats are not something individual actors can tackle alone. When I'm talking about individual members, I'm talking about individual state institutions, private sector, academia, academic community, international organizations. In recent years, I have witnessed increased efforts to strengthen cooperation at home and in the national environment, and the awareness that we are much stronger when responding to cyber threats are challenging together, and it's growing, and rightly so. But just due to the fact that we are just at the margins of the NATO summit in Wales, where cybersecurity is going to be high at the agenda of the heads of the states and governments, I would like to emphasize that the progress achieved in this field since Chicago is really commendable, and it's showing that the alliance is well on the track to respond to the emerging security challenges. NATO enhanced cyber defense policy that we, the ministers of defense, have adopted this year in June, emphasizes, for example, that cyber defense is part of NATO's core task of collective defense and builds a framework for further strengthening on NATO and national cyber defense capabilities through the NATO defense planning process, multinational projects, training, education, and exercises, greater information sharing, engagement with industry, cooperation with the partners, and many other elements. And just to finish the primary responsibility for national cyber defense, however, rests with nations. So therefore, it is important that we strengthen our efforts at home to continue to improve our cyber defense capabilities. Alliance cyber defense training, education and exercises are indispensable in this regard, so as well as the efforts of the framework of the European Union. The strength of cybersecurity is not only about, and this I would like to underline, yesterday we heard about what the people are the leaders, but I would like to say that strength of cybersecurity is not only about the technical solution and the legal framework, but it is all about the qualified, educated, and the trained people. And further on, probably I will respond to what we are doing back here in Slovenia on that respect. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for this.
It was 5 minutes.
It was 4.5. Yes. Excellent, excellent.
You know, in military, we know what to do.
Sure. Let me say that I am inclined to pass on immediately to Mr. Dukaru for his comments, because he is, of course, in the NATO setting, and Mr. Jakič already addressed it, and maybe you can follow up on that.
Well, thank you very much indeed, and also I'm here glad to be at this prestigious forum, also on behalf of the NATO Secretary General. By the way, it was because of this prestige of the forum that he allowed me to be one day before the summit here. I want to focus a bit on the threat landscape and a bit of what we're doing in this context and what should be the way ahead. Now, I'm heading the Emerging Security Challenges Division. If I were to describe the security landscape in a very short sentence, I would say it's a combination of emerging challenges and re-emerging challenges. I mean, emerging challenges like cyber, the use of energy for political or military purpose and so on, but also in combination with what we thought is behind us, like threats of territorial integrity, of sovereignty, or of states, and these emerging and re-emerging challenges, they kind of blend, and I quote, harmoniously together. Speaking about cyber threats, let me give you a couple of, I would say, suggestive figures. There is a study on a global study on data breach, which comes to the conclusion that the data breaches in 2013 have grown 350% with the year compared to the year before. So this is just breaches without measuring the impact. When we come to measure impact, for example, the impact on that crime generates in terms of value, it's estimated that this year the impact would be of cybercrime would be about $445 billion, and it might grow to $500 billion next year. And then when it comes to really impact in terms of hardware and destruction, we should just have the examples of Saudi Aramco or what happened in 2013 in South Korea on a banking sector. And I think it was just last week that the Financial Times had a front page article where we're highlighting the threat over financial markets. Now I'm coming to NATO's business, which is security and hard security. You can imagine that this has to do with the essentials of our way of life, being able to defend and protect sovereignty and the well-functioning of our society. I asked our colleagues at the NATO and NATO Computer Incident Response Center of what they see on their sensors now that we put also active sensors, and they say there are about 200 million suspect incidents per month over NATO's open networks. And about 1 to 200 per month have to take human expertise. The other one are dealt in an automated way. What is NATO doing about it? NATO will endorse in 2 days at the heads of state level what is called the Enhanced Cyber Defense Policy that has been already agreed, actually, and agreed by defense ministers in June. This is NATO's third policy. We had one in 2008 and 2011. So it's like NATO Cyber 3.0, if you like to put in cyber terms. What does it bring new? First and foremost, the point that the Minister made. It recognizes for the first time that cyber defense is part of NATO's core task of collective defense. So it links it with the raison d'etre of the alliance. And this is reflected also in the principles when it states the indivisibility of security applies in cyberspace as well. There are a couple of other important things. It includes assistance to allies as one of the principles and also objectives, knowing at the same time that this should be done in the context where states have the main responsibility to protect their own networks, while NATO has the responsibility to protect its own networks. But we have a framework of more than a dozen items how to address this aspect. There's another important principle, and this is the fact that it recognizes that international law, including humanitarian law, and UN Charter applies in cyberspace. So it says that this is not ungoverned space. We're not creating law, NATO is not. But NATO is stating that it recognizes that we have to apply this. And there's a different story how international law evolves and what are the sources in this domain. But I think this is huge as a political statement by the heads of state and government. Now, in terms of what it brings else, NATO has achieved in the last 3 years what is the centralized protection of its networks over 50 plus sites. We're now wanting to expand the number of sites and also include deployable networks for operations under this centralized umbrella. We have introduced cyber defense capability targets in the NATO defense planning process, where actually these targets become obligatory for nations. It's not just a direction or a recommendation. It's part of the process where it's assumed obligation to invest in capabilities at the national level. It provides for increased information sharing, training and education, and for the first time, the summit also will announce the establishment of the NATO cyber range. So, like, it's not a shooting range; it's actually a defensive range to test how defenses work, based on the offer by the Estonian Ministry of its own network. And last but not least, and I will finish here, it establishes a NATO industry cyber partnership. Recognizes that without this partnership, you cannot advance in a coherent manner because it's in the industry that owns about 80% of the networks. There's more to say, but I will stop here and I will be open to question and answers.
Thank you so much. After the interventions by Mr. Jakič and you, Mr. Ducaro, we are sure that we are really putting steps forward after originally Lisbon, 2010, when cyber was defined as one of the new challenges for NATO. We have had Chicago, you're going to Wales now, and we are looking forward to the consolidation of these steps. I'm going to my left side to Ambassador Ischinger. I repeat, the #1 of the famous Sicherheitskonferenz in Munich. And we're looking forward to your intervention.
Thank you, sir. First of all, let me say how happy I am to be here. It's a privilege to participate with all these extremely knowledgeable other panelists. Let me just make a few brief points. My first point is simply to reflect what the two previous speakers have said about, essentially about defense and NATO activities. A few years ago, I began asking myself, regarding my own responsibility to come up with an interesting agenda each year in Munich, I asked myself, well, should I put cyber on the agenda? And if we do so, is there going to be anything more than a lot of hot air going to come out of this discussion in Munich? So I had serious doubts. This was maybe 4 years ago. I have learned, it's been a relatively steep learning curve. I have learned, and that's the point I want to make here, that no issue has attracted my participants in Munich, which are defense ministers and similar people, government decision makers, and people who think about hard power and soft power, etc. No issue has attracted more interest over the last few years than cyber. I cannot now imagine that we would conduct the next Munich Security Conference without at least devoting a couple of hours, hopefully with very senior speakers from within Europe, but also from the transatlantic community, and that will not change. In other words, we do have, for those who are interested in foreign policy and security and defense policy, we are dealing with a high priority new item on our agenda, which does not necessarily mean that any of the classic items on the agenda, whether it's energy security or military security, tanks, rockets, missiles, etc., is totally disappearing from the radar screen, but the spectrum is simply getting wider. First point. Second point, about 100 years ago, people started dreaming, even before the technology was available, people started dreaming about traveling into space. It took half a century and lots of failed attempts until finally after World War II in the 1950s, as everybody knows, space flight satellites became a reality. And sure enough, this new technology led military strategists to think about military applications to, space technology. And just to drive this analogy one step further, it is almost a miracle when you look back to the 1950s, 60s, 70s, that we can say today that we have practically achieved a more or less watertight global regime which does not allow the deployment, the stationing of weapons in outer space. International conventions don't allow this, and I'm not aware of any major violation of this, and hopefully that won't change. So that's my second point. My question is there any hope that we can work not only towards developing more offensive cyber capacity, but towards limiting the potential of offensive cyber activities? Is it possible to imagine that we could end up with watertight, verifiable limitations, regulations, such as in space? Third point, very briefly, I'll add a non-military point, and I'll make it very simple. I think you and I need to worry, maybe to some extent, about what our intelligence agencies are going to pick up about you or about us. But I think we need to be aware that Google probably knows a lot more about you and I than your intelligence community wishes to know about you and I. In other words, it's not only about military and intelligence applications of cyber, it is about data, period. What the hell is going to happen to my data? Can they be protected, yes or no? And by whom? Is it the nation state? Is it the European Union? Is it the UN conventions? I think the extent to which we will be needing to focus on this question, above and beyond the question, how can we protect ourselves against attacks in the military sense or in the business intelligence sense, is very important, which is why I think the European Union data protection regulation, which is under consideration, is overdue, should be pushed through as quickly as possible, that would enable Europe to have a position and be a partner for a more global discussion. I think the very last point I want to make is about my own country, since I'm I guess the only German here. We have had in Germany, of course, a cyber debate which was not a healthy discussion, because it was focused almost exclusively for the last year or a year and a half on Chancellor Merkel's cell phone and on NSA-related activities, and it was more a destructive and a negative transatlantic debate, which led our discussion in Germany to lose the necessary focus on what was going on at NATO, both in terms of offense and defense, and what is going to be important in terms of protecting our data as civilians and as governments, and the expectations that this brings with it regarding coordination and cooperation within the European Union. I hope very much, and that's my last word, that the current European security crisis, meaning Ukraine, will focus our minds again on what's really important, namely on making sure that these capabilities, these emerging capabilities, are used in order to better defend our own interests, regionally and globally, and in order to defend the freedom and the liberty of the individual. We shouldn't have a continued transatlantic divisive NSA debate. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this intervention, Mr. Ischinger. I would think that a remark you made about Google and the big data will certainly be of interest to the audience for the Q&As later on. And then, of course, it's also about accountability of the Googles in this world and the internet service providers in this very context. The EU was mentioned, logical to get to Mr. Stankic and later on to Mr. Purser.
Thank you very much, Uri. Ladies and gentlemen, it's indeed my pleasure to be among these distinguished panelists in order to address this very important issue. First of all, I think it's important to start with the statement that technology is bringing to us a lot of fantastic opportunities. Let's talk about big data, let's think about social networks, let's growth of the economy supported by internet has been mentioned. So I think one way or the other we should recognize that before we start speaking about cybersecurity. At the same time, of course, cybersecurity issues are there and are very prominent. Several figures have been mentioned earlier. Just to remind you about a recent report produced by the World Economic Forum in which they stated that the economic growth will be decreased by 3,000 billion euros if we don't address cybersecurity issues properly. And then let's look at the reality. What's going on right now today? We know about the cybersecurity issues which were recently published in media in the retail sector. But let's also remind ourselves that, for example, just recently, US Nuclear Regulatory Agency has been successfully hacked. So it's not just the regulatory supermarkets, if you want, the retailers or supermarkets, if you want, but you know the authorities who have outstanding possibilities and capabilities to deal with the cybersecurity, they have been successfully hacked by cybercrime. So one way or the other, this is a very important issue, and this is exactly why European Union and also European Commission has been dealing with it for already some time. First, issues which we tried to address on the level of the EU was already in 2001, so way beyond the the new Lisbon Treaty, where actually EU got the authority and mandate to work on common defense and security strategy. So already in 2001, we looked at specific issues which were related to cybersecurity. For example, how to create CERT in the member states, how to demand that telecoms would report to security breaches, and so on and so on. But let's forget what happened from 2001 to most recently. In 2013, we have adopted a cybersecurity strategy. The cybersecurity strategy of the European Union has been a strategy developed by 3 services led by Vice President Cruz, by Commissioner responsible for Home Affairs, Commissioner Malmström, and by High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Defense of the European Union, Baroness Ashton. So one way or the other, we have produced this cybersecurity strategy, and the cybersecurity strategy, we tried to address a number of very important issues. For example, we said, first of all, we have to introduce something like what we call a soft law. This soft law, of course, is not introduced by the European Commission, but is developed by a platform of governments and companies with the objective to share common approaches in dealing with cybersecurity issues. Second thing which we are doing with the cybersecurity strategy is we are developing a specific opportunity that specific agencies who have a mandate to work on cybersecurity within the EU work together, most notably ENISA, which is the agency responsible for the network information security, Europol, and European Defense Agency as well. Then the third avenue of common work is that we try to, of course, work with our most important partners in the world on cybersecurity issues. Therefore, we have opened a dialogue on cybersecurity issues with the United States, which has very similar issues like we are, but we also have a cybersecurity dialogue, for example, with People's Republic of China. Fourth avenue, which is very important for us, is that we work also with general public. General public is very important because we know that cybersecurity actually has implications on the big companies, on governments, but also on citizens. So this is why we have regular cybersecurity months, and the next one is just starting in October this year. And the last avenue which I would like to underline here is that we have prepared what we call the Network and Information Security Directive, which is actually a new regulatory framework with which we actually try to address a number of issues for the regulatory framework with the member states. Which are these regulatory issues? First of all, we try to raise the level of the cybersecurity readiness in all EU member states on a common level. Common minimum level. Could be better, but should not be worse. Second thing, which is very important, we try to work through this regulatory framework with the companies, with businesses, in such a way that businesses have to report on cybersecurity breaches. I think it's very important also for this panel to recognize that we will be successful in cybersecurity only if we involve also businesses. And now I think we are in a stage where this directive is just still in the procedure in the European Union institutions. European Parliament has already developed a position which is very supportive. But let's be frank also, because we're talking under Chatham House rules, we have a number of negative views or a bit contradicting views from EU member states. To give a bit of the insight, for example, there is already a very well-established group of 6 or 7 member states who share information on the cybersecurity breaches on regular level. However, they do not want to develop a real partnership with other member states who are less developed in this respect. Even more, instead of developing the operational partnership in sharing the information in very up-to-date manner on security breaches. They say we will, instead of sharing this information fast and in operational level, we want to have the discussion with member states only on strategic level. Of course, we are confident that this is not enough, and we are confident that by working together with member states, we can achieve a better readiness of all member states in the domain of the cybersecurity, and of course deliver on what we are expected to deliver by the citizens and by the businesses. I end up over here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. This panel is a very sophisticated panel, because you see that the chairman is actually not needed. Mr. Stankic already mentioned Mr. Purser as the man of ENISA, and well, the floor is yours. For no more than 5 minutes, my dear friend, the Minister of Defense, murmured to me.
Okay, thank you very much.
Military discipline here.
So good afternoon, everybody. My thanks also to be able to speak to you on behalf of ENISA today. My colleague, I think, has given an excellent view of what the EU is doing at the highest level to resolve cybersecurity issues. I would like to come back to setting the scene as we're essentially talking about cyber threats. Yeah. And in order to do that, I would just like to give you a very quick overview of what ENISA published in its last ENISA threat landscape report. Now, how many people have read the ENISA threat landscape report? Oh dear. Mr. Moderator, can you say homework? It looks like I have a lot of work to do. Please have a look at it. It's free on the website. And what is interesting about this report is it groups together 250 different sources of information worldwide and consolidates them. So it's not our work, it's your work. It's the work of the member states and the communities around the globe, and it gives you a very good picture of what's happening, a consolidated picture which we hope is tailored towards your needs. Now, I have a few points which I would like to remark from this, and then I will be quiet and pass on. What is happening that's good? Well, what is happening that's good is that information flow is better. There are more reports being generated. Of course, the danger here is we don't want too much information, because too much information is data pollution, and we're none the wiser. Vendors are quicker to respond, so patches come out quicker when there's a problem. Cooperation is definitely increasing. An example would be ENISA and Europol, EC3, who have a very active collaboration. I could give you many more examples. These are all good signs. It's also very good that there's more discussion in general on things like industrial espionage and state-sponsored attacks. Indeed, we've heard them mentioned in this panel a bit earlier. And let me also say, my colleague from Europol being here, I think Europol had some great successes over the last year in combating some of the malicious code that's been going around, and this is really a very interesting and significant step forward. So these are all good things. What are the bad things? Well, the bad things aren't surprising. The threats are getting more sophisticated, and let's be quite clear, the bad guys are at least as sophisticated as the good guys in terms of producing code. They have all the same sort of software quality control procedures. It's almost industrial scale. They're really, really good. They're a very serious adversary these days. More nation states have developed capabilities that can be used to infiltrate targets. Mobile devices are increasingly targeted and are a weak point because mobile devices have not had the time to come up to the maturity of fixed-line devices. And there are new areas of concern. We've already heard about big data, Internet of Things, and things like this. So there are a lot of things which we need to be a little bit worried about. Now, please go and look at the report, but I'll just give you a few of the lessons learned, and then I will finish setting the stage as far as ENISA is concerned. So, threat information is available, but analysis and assessment are at low levels of maturity. We are not quick enough, we are not good enough at putting the data together to get a conclusion. We need more contextual information. A lot of security is contextual. Without the context, you can make some pretty bad mistakes. Very simple example, if I asked you what food you would like to eat, probably you would have no problem telling me, Indian kitchen, Italian. If I asked you that before you board an airplane, I'm obviously socially profiling you. It takes on a whole different context, yeah? Black swans are key. What do I mean by these? These are unexpected events. These are things that drive the security industry. An example of this would be Stuxnet. Stuxnet was something we could very easily have predicted on a technological basis. What was different was the target. It was a game changer because suddenly we're not talking about loss of money, we are talking about loss of human lives. And nobody predicted that, funnily enough. And we still have more need for coordination. I will end with one simple statement, because I realize I'm using up my time. But it's really, I've spent most of my life actually as a Chief Information Security Officer in the private sector for the financial community. And I can really assimilate with this. A significant number of organizations do not implement simple solutions. Never mind the complex ones, the simple ones aren't there. And this is something to learn by. And this is certainly true of my experience over 15 years in industry. We sometimes forget that the simple solutions go a long way. And I'd like to end with that comment. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We try to learn the public at large by now about strong and weak passwords, isn't it?
For instance.
Isn't it?
For instance.
Yeah, right. Well, there we go, Europol.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for giving me the floor. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure for me to represent European Police Office here among such a distinguished guests. And actually, yesterday I found out, thanks to Bled, that I'm not young generation anymore, because it was exactly 30 years of my service within the police, counting my work for Europol. So time flies, and through my whole career, I was only catching offenders and getting them behind the bars. And actually what we are doing at the Europol, we try to support member states in prevention and fighting against serious organized crime and terrorism. So we try to be operational. We have actually databases storing the intelligence information on serious organized crime and terrorism. We are enjoying actually the very beautiful building which was given by the Dutch government 2 years ago. We are very grateful for that. We are using the very secure environment for exchange of information when we support member states and law enforcement agency in their fighting organized crime. And apart from this operational support, we have even a very good overview from the strategic perspective about the criminal threats. What organized crime threats are about towards the EU. We collect information from our key stakeholders, member states, and set then priorities which are approved by member states, and we support the orchestrated activities towards the threats. And we have even some picture at disposal, what's going on, how information technology, how internet actually affected the organized crime activity. And from the last serious organized crime assessment, we found out that there were big shifts, that criminals actually are misusing the legislative loopholes. There are still different legal frameworks allowing them to escape from the jurisdiction. They misuse, of course, internet. As such, it's becoming the marketplace for trade of all kinds of illicit goods, from drugs to forged documents, endangered species of animals and whatsoever. Internet is used for their communication, for accessing potential victims, trying to get their information, then using later on for committing the online payment frauds. They actually organize arrangement of their logistics, they distribute goods, they actually wash their money, yeah, and they try to conceal the activities. So for what reason it's actually used for the legitimate purposes, in the same way it's actually used by the criminals, and we can expect further development for the future. And last point, it's more or less related to the cybercrime, which was already mentioned. Recently, we actually signed agreement with ENISA, which is one of our key partners, and the Commission, together with Council, decided to entrusted Europol with responsibility for fight against cybercrime. It's covering actually triple mandate, I would say. It's trying to prevent and fight against organized crime when criminals generate high profits by online payment frauds, or the crimes where the victims are seriously affected, especially in the area of online sexual child abuse. And finally, we focus on the area when actually European databases and critical infrastructure is affected by the cybercrime. So it's just shortly about our mandate and what we are doing in this actually narrower area, which is cybercrime, which is not cybersecurity, but it's obvious part of the cybersecurity. Thank you.
What you actually state here is what we see in the reports of also private companies which are in this field, that if I may call it that way, or say it that way, that the malware is becoming increasingly malignant, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, suspicious or malicious software which is being distributed in a majority cases with the intention to get personal data or to get data of credentials to get into bank accounts, and then later on to misuse this data. There are actually different kind of software which can even deny owner of the or user of the PC from getting access and then to extort it later on. So actually malicious software is one of the area we focus on.
Now the commonplace is to say last but not least, but it's really meant. Mr. Zala.
Thank you. I am very glad to be here, especially as a representative of one nation from EU or NATO or this region. So first of all, our institution is making the cyber defense already for 5 years, which means that it's very simple. There is nothing awfully sophisticated. We always say that prevention means not to react after an incident, because then it's already too late. So we try and do regularly checks on different governmental and critical infrastructure systems, where my colleagues work only not with single penetration testing, but they work also manually. And in the meanwhile, in the last 2 years, we also work with malware analysis. And we were also recovering some botnets, and then we realized how hard is it. And only one small piece of water in the huge ocean. In the meanwhile, in these 5 years, last year we got a new cyber defense strategy and cyber defense law from valid or entered into force from 1st of July. Which makes the life a bit more easier, because you don't have to seek for links to the politicians. About the topic itself, I would say that the challenge is not new. The challenge is at least 2 or 3 decades old. The question is when we started to deal with the problem. If we think about whom do we have to afraid? Do we have to afraid criminals, rather, who produce about 500 billions of income from it, much more than drug traffic or pornography or olive oil falsing, which belongs also to this business. And we can say that this is far the biggest portion among the criminalities. But we had to learn that the challenges are always higher and higher, more and more serious. About 15 years ago, the criminals started to make online banking fraud, even with malicious softwares. And that time, they had about several dozens or hundreds of malwares per year. And then they decided that, okay, the money is not enough. We have to make a higher income. They started to sell the possibility. So if you like or not, you can buy, like in a web shop, different keyloggers, and you can buy emails, and you can do anything. So it's really a huge business. And then we realized that the industrial espionage came in, and we see that from all the incomes, maybe 90% is the industrial espionage. And for example, I don't want to say that For example, if you see a new iPhone, iPhone 6, or a new Galaxy Tab or whatever, you see it sometimes on countries' website which are far away from that place. Then in the last, I could say 2 years, but it's not true, because we remember the Red October campaign, and we can say that in the last 5-6 years, we see that also the state-sponsored attack came in. And the question is, who makes it, and who is behind? And I can't assure you, but I do think, and all of my colleagues, not only Hungarian ones, think that it's not the states who make those malwares. So it's unimaginable that police officers or intelligence officers sitting at their desk and writing malwares to attack and get information from somewhere else, from a counter-interested country. So no, not. We are talking about criminals who are supported or sponsored by states, and those malwares are used. And just to mention, in the last 4 or 5 years, we have yearly about 3 million malwares, so it's a huge problem. So we see only some of those malwares. And last but not least, about trust. I was wondering here, what we are talking about? And I was asked by a young lady with a microphone and camera, what do I think about it? And I told, yes, the problem was the government and the institutions outsourced everything in the last 20 years. And they lost, they didn't lose, they even didn't get the responsibility, because they do not understand this part of the business, which means that we trusted to system administrators. We believed them that they understand the business, and therefore we got into a situation where we were not understanding the security. And nowadays we see, and that's why this forum is also here, that how we can get back to the trust. But trust means not the system administrators, the different stakeholders, where not only governments, but also the industry who produces, and the civil society must find a solution for the security. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Zala. In order not to forget about the audience and the questions and answers which we would like to get from the audience to the panel, let me change a little bit the way in which we proceed, and let me just, on my part, pick up 2 points which may be directly going through the several interventions. And one of them is the last remark on the part of Mr. Zala, who is talking about something which we call in grandiose terms, but really meant as well, you know, the approach from a multi-stakeholders perspective. And there we are right in the middle of it when we hear the comment by Mr. Ischinger on, for instance, Google and the big data. And the question, and I pose it to you and also to Mr. Zala, because you are amidst of that discussion. Are we to keep the private actors accountable by themselves for what they are doing in the cyberspace? The Googles, the internet service providers, etc. What's actually the answer to the question you raised, Mr. Ischinger, in this respect? And Mr. Zala as well. Very, very brief, please. Very brief.
Yes. I believe I don't know the answer. I think it's a very complex question you are asking. Essentially, what I think is that governments are faced with the job to regulate, for example, Google companies, to the minimum extent necessary, but sufficiently so that, you know, the fundamental rights of our citizens, quote unquote data protection, in liberty of the individual, is sufficiently protected. This is a difficult line to walk. And I'm not sure all of our governments and institutions have already found the final answer to this. I think it's a hugely important challenge. But I appreciate your raising the question, because it is, as I said earlier, it's not only about what government agencies are doing, it's also about what the private sector is doing to us with our data.
Yeah, I think that we have to afraid rather of criminals, because they can steal our data and they can misuse it. But if we are talking about Google, then in this sense, I do think that so the internet was designed not to be a secure network. First of all, it was for military reasons. And Google belongs to that very center, to those 5%, which you can't switch off, because it's in the center, and they will always have the information. But about the information sharing, one very crucial point, why we do not see it, and Mr. Stančić mentioned it, that there are some countries, I know exactly with whom we can exchange information. The problem is that, for example, if I see a command and control server park, which is in Germany or the Netherlands, then I have to give the information to the authorities there. Otherwise, I can't get the information from them. And in the vast majority of the cases, national security or intelligence services want to keep the data. They don't want to give it. And I think in the EU and the NATO, and we tried also in the V4 group, and it was not functioning yet, that let's oblige us ourselves that we give that infection information to each other, otherwise we can't reach anything.
Well, this is again some bridge towards Mr. Stančić and Mr. Ducaro. Let's first go to Mr. Stančić, because your address, and you made that remark, and perhaps elaborate on it very briefly, these 7 or 8 culprits in your companion.
Thank you very much. I think, the challenge which we are facing is how to produce to the citizens, to the businesses, better regulatory framework, while at the same time not limit competitiveness of the industry. So one way or the other, I think it's clear that, if you ask a bureaucrat, do we need more regulation? Of course, I will say we need more regulation. But I think the tricky thing is how to have the right balance of regulation and not to overdo it. So I think at the same time, and I want to underline here, that if we do the things right in the domain of the data security, personal data protection, and that is very closely linked to cybersecurity, then I think this can provide a good opportunity for European industry to grow. Because, for example, one of the big paradigms now in the business is data-driven businesses, big data and so on. We read it everywhere. And of course, that's very closely linked with the privacy of the data. Are we going to share our private data with Googles of this world? If we get better services, and what do they do with our data? And I think if we, as Europeans, set up the right regulatory framework, which will stimulate the businesses to establish their seats and do the businesses in Europe, that could be a boost for European companies. So I think, of course, it's a tricky thing how to have the right balances regarding regulation, but at the same time, both the businesses as well as the citizens expect from us that we regulate more, but at the same time, regulate smart.
Very brief question, and I address myself to those who have police or regulatory or intelligence functions. If it is in the interest of the individual, of the citizen, to buy, increasingly sophisticated encryption software to be able to communicate securely, to what extent does this create a problem, an unsolvable problem maybe, to those who are trying to persecute the criminals? Because if all the criminals use the secure software, how can you go after them? What's the answer?
There we are in the rat race for Europol. And also, I would say, I see Mr. Ducaro again asking the floor. We go to him after Mr. Martino, but then I immediately give away my questions to both Mr. Jakič and Mr. Ducaro about cyber and Article 5 NATO. Yes? So prepare yourself for your answer. Okay, go ahead.
I have to admit that it's a big problem for us to keep the pace with the criminals. That's why it was a reason for setting up of the cybercrime, actually, to concentrate in one point at the European level. Then we can actually better address what is the phenomena, what is it all about, what are the tools, how it can be orchestrated, and what I'm actually forgotten in my actually presentation in the beginning, what is key for us to invite industry, to invite private entities, and actually those who have to say, who can help together, because it's about the cooperation and actually focusing, especially in times when we have to do more with less. Yeah, in this economic environment, we cannot do what we would like to do. When I speak with the head of cybercrime, Troels Erting Jorgensen, who is very good, very effective, but he would like to get the red rockets to get on the moon, yeah, more or less, just to fight. So it's a big problem for us, and the cooperation and close coordination with the private entities and its other actors.
Duco, you already wanted to follow up on this topic and then extend to a somewhat different arena, namely NATO Article 5, and Mr. Jakič will follow up on that.
So I'll use the same time for two quick answers, two questions. On the first one, on how far government should go, I think it was mentioned, this is a multi-stakeholder environment, and it's about sharing responsibilities in this multi-stakeholder environment among individuals, among industry, and among government. How to do it? Individuals have a role in terms of, starting to do the basic hygiene, and we have to establish a culture of cyber defense. Governments have a role in regulation, but they should go as far as not to impede economic activity, and should empower the markets also to play a role in actually taking their responsibilities in putting the premium on security and cyber defense through insurance processes, through the fact that they will be out of business if they're not including the products, the necessary securities and so on. So that's my answer to the first question. On Article 5, you made a particular question. I think it's, of course, collective defense leads directly to Article 5. And there is the immediate question, at what point would allies invoke Article 5? The answer here is that there is no threshold. And there is decision not to think or decide about the threshold, because the whole purpose the Article 5 was designed by the founding fathers about 65 years ago was to have this invocation by a political decision in a specific context. And this not, I think we have the only example where Article 5 was invoked was after 9/11. It's a context that the founding fathers never envisaged. So we should keep it as this. Also, this helps, this is an ambiguity that has also a deterrent effect. Because we don't have a line so that somebody always shoots below the threshold. So we will see what the threshold be thinking about what the context will be. The last point is that there's no assumption that any response to a cyber attack will be only with cyber means. That's also important to know.
Thank you very much. I think Mr. Ducan already answered some of the question, but just to point it out, due to the fact that we are talking about a Wales summit or NATO summit in Wales day after tomorrow it starts. I must say that it will be on the field of cyber defense, beside very important topics about Afghanistan and the Ukraine-Russian conflict. On the field of cyber defense, it was already today mentioned, it was basically three topics which will be put it on the floor, which is the enhanced cyber defense policy, which was adopted by the Ministers of Defense in June 2014, following up the February discussion in 2014, where for the first time, even all the discussions goes on in EU and the NATO for, for quite a long time, but for the first time, cyber defense is presented as the part of collective defense, which, and that's the answer, including also the Article 5. But the dilemma is how to respond to Article 5 due to the fact that it is the problematic of the identification of those who committed the cyber crimes due to the fact that they are using different IP, so you never know from where this comes. But anyway, it is, at least this is the question, or this is the answer to those who are saying that we should share the information, we should cooperate among the allies partners with this, that enhanced cyber defense policy is presented as the part of collective defense. We are starting to sharing like it's, let's say, traditional Article 5. You know, Article 5 is somebody attacks Slovenia, all the alliance partners are attacked, so they are basically involved in the conflict. So in that respect, if this is, you know, we will go in that direction, Article 5 in the cyber defense policy, which means that basically we must share the information, intelligent information, we must share the data, etc., to be able to respond in proper way to defend those who are attacked by the cyber attack.
Questions from the audience? Please mention your affiliation and then come up with your question. And no long observations, but simply questions to the panel. I notice here a finger on the third row. Some others who would like to raise questions? Yeah, third row on the left side.
Thank you, Chairman. Liviu Mureșan, Euris Foundation, Romania. First, sanctions against Russia and cyber. Could we expect a new chapter in the cyber war? Second, President Ischinger, thank you very much mentioning space. Space security and critical infrastructure protection. Analysts have mentioned that the biggest threat to the global economy is coming from space. How do you see these developments in the future? Sunstorms and so on, which can disrupt the whole construction we have around based on cyber. Thank you very much.
Global disruptions. Okay. Well, this is quite a question, the first one. Well, let's pick up the answers immediately on the part of the panel, and I'm looking at, for instance, our NATO friends. Yep.
There's no discussion at this point of any cyber sanctions against Russia. Also because, I mean, you could take them from two perspectives. Is there any cyber defense, are there any cyber exports towards Russia or so on that are going on and that have to do with specific defenses? Not significantly. So in terms of procurement, it's below my radar screen, let me put it this way, compared to others. Sanctions in terms of cutting Russia out of the internet and so on, I think this one really backfires both ways. So that's the answer. Yeah.
Okay. Over there.
I'll be just very brief on facts, and maybe Steve can elaborate on this further. But you know, when we look at the cyber security attacks landscape, I think we have some patterns there. Yeah. And I think these patterns, so we see significantly more cybersecurity attacks coming from some countries and much less from the others. Yeah? But can we have differential treatment in this respect, not in the domain of defense, but in the broader domain? I doubt. So probably in the domain of the broader, I'm not talking about the cybersecurity defense only, but in the domain of the cybersecurity at large, I think we should probably not have differential treatment, but we should treat all the attacks in a very similar way, while recognizing that there are more cybersecurity attacks coming from specific countries than from the others. But Steve, maybe it's good to elaborate on where do we have this.
Yeah, let me just say a couple of words about critical information infrastructure protection. What is quite interesting looking at the data we have, and we now have data because the telecoms framework makes security breach notification obligatory, is that cyber attacks are a very, very small part of the problem. It's not about cyber attacks at all. And the example that the gentleman gave was actually an extremely good one, because most of protecting critical infrastructure is about things like natural disasters, power supplies, human errors, lack of good contracts between various links in the chain to supply critical services. So take the example of a sandstorm. I mean, there are some very good things you can do to protect yourself against these kind of things. Yeah? I wouldn't talk about space, but it really is quite interesting to see people's perceptions. And I remember that I think in the 2013 data, malicious attacks were 8% of the problem. The biggest problem, incidentally, a massive, I think it's over 40%, is badly configured and functioning software and hardware. So this is a lesson to us. When we need to protect critical infrastructure, we need to remember the side which is not malicious, the side which is simply getting our act together and making sure that systems operate in the right way. And a very last comment, because we said nothing about it today, but it's tremendously important, and that's the economics of cybersecurity. Because it's easy to break something, it's very, very difficult to protect it. It costs a fortune. And most of my career as a Chief Information Security Officer, I was not struggling against attacks. I was struggling against lack of resources or lack of scalability, or both. Thank you.
The second question on your part, sir, was about the disruption on a global scale, isn't it? If I may ask you, isn't the question not actually leading to the answer? Yes, internet makes for the potency of global disruption, isn't it? And that's why we are talking so much about capacity building on a global scale, isn't it? I'm sorry to put it in that way. Madam, question.
Thank you, Vasilka Sancin from the Faculty of Law, University of Ljubljana. I would like to ask the panelists, what are your opinions on if an attack does come from one state, and would you respond in self-defense with conventional weapons? Would you argue for such an option? This is, well, I know a bit tricky question, but still I think it's a very important one. It will become relevant sooner or later. And the other question is, if there is a significant threat coming from a certain state, there is evidence of this significant threat, do you think the state can shut down all the computer systems in order to protect itself or its critical infrastructure and successfully argue it's acting in the state of necessity? Thank you.
Thank you for this question. Well, it's about the state, not about the states and the European community or the United Nations. So there we go, Mr. Zala. What would be your answer?
I would be very surprised if somebody could tell that he or she or the country was attacked by a certain country. First of all those devices and solutions, as Mr. Ischinger mentioned as well earlier, we give the possibilities, the VPNs, crypto devices, Tor, and other anonymizing possibilities. You will never know who attacked you. You can only guess. And on the other hand, I was wondering, even at the former question, that how we could answer. So we would be attacked, and what will happen? We will look for our criminals, or our military or police officers will write attacking software. So I doubt. So I think this is rather a polemic. I would say no huge disasters will come. Rather, the problem can happen, what Mr. Purser told, that many providers and many services are so problematic. Do you know that 40% of the cloud providers lose the data without any help, and you will never get it back? So this is a very big problem, and I think that we need a mindset change, and if we achieve it, and if the state can regulate a bit, then the state will be in a situation that the government can learn what to do. We can achieve that our children who are using their phones, with 7 years, more than 70% of the phones are iPhones and Android phones, and they don't know what they are doing on it. Simply use it, but unsecurely. How they will grow up? So the state has a very important duty and has to achieve that security awareness is everywhere.
Okay, and then the second question was actually about what to do on the part of the state, and how far can the state go in with its countermeasures, isn't it, madam?
Yes,
did I understand it?
Shut down the whole system affecting the economy, consequently, and successfully argue it's actually a necessity, so there are no necessity to provide any remedies.
Okay, well, this question is actually implicitly already answered by our Hungarian friend.
More than 70% of the internet service providers are coming from abroad, everywhere. So I know not too many countries. So Romania has its own, Turkey has its own. In the Baltic states, Google is the provider. In Hungary, the General Electric. I could list it by countries. They will never stop it, because it's a different question. You can stop some servers which belong to the state. You can't stop the others.
I see here a remarkable interest in answering this question on Mr. Perser, Mr. Dugaru.
Okay, very quickly. We have some good news here. It'll never come to that, I think. One of the things that Europe has done very well over the last few years is we have developed a plan for what is called the Pan-European exercise. And in this exercise, all the member states work together with real operational teams and real scenarios to decide how to deal with an incident. And we're much, much more sophisticated than that. So if such an event would occur, there are procedures and policies in place to make sure the right things are done at the right time. Of course, it won't be perfect, but we'll be a lot better than shutting down all the systems, I can assure you. And one last remark, because it's tremendously important to show the progress. When we started this in 2010, we had nothing to test. There were no standard operating procedures in a cross-border environment. Now there's quite a good set of procedures which are being tested, and the exercise will take place in a few weeks, days even. And this is the third time we've done it. So there you have some good news. It won't happen, I can assure you. Not in Europe, at least.
My answer is to the first question, and it's somehow no one's different than the one of Mr. Zala. I will respond first. We don't know. Secondly, it depends. It depends on what? One is attribution, but I would say it's not always a problem that the attribution cannot be done. It can be even the case that an attacker assumes attribution. So, or it can be the case where we put together information from the networks with information for classical intelligence, and we get there. So this is a matter of time and resources. So we might get to good attribution. But it depends also on something else, on impact. And in this circumstances that political masters will make the judgment on this. So I don't know, it depends, and I gave you the sense of on what it depends.
Right. There is some time for a next question. No? No questions anymore? Okay, well. We are...
Some concluding.
You would like to get back to that question?
Yeah,
okay.
I would like to go back to that question due to the fact that it was previous questions were referring to the Article 5. So it's also going in that direction, but it is a very provocative question, I must say. But due to the fact that NATO and the countries, the alliance, the political international body, we would respond firstly with the political method. So we would not use the conventional weapon to fight in that respect. But what we are talking here today, and normally what we are talking among the ministers of defense, is the prevention and exercises which were mentioned. And one of the exercises will take place in Italy on the level EU. It was also mentioned concerning the development of the use of NATO cyber range capabilities.
To test
Mr. Ducaro was already mentioned. That was idea due to the fact that among our colleagues, allies, Estonia is, let's say, leading this cyber defense development policy. They put it they put it down that we should organize these cyber range capabilities networked intended for training and exercises, just to be prepared for this kind of attacks.
We are coming to a closure of this session, ladies and gentlemen. May I say on my part, I've 3 remarks on the basis of what the panel was discussing and also the questions from the audience. The first is actually that I heard somewhat implicit but also explicit some remarks and observations on the need for what we call by now the capacity building on this subject. And that all starts, of course, with the political will. And it is a good message on the part of, for instance, Mr. Ischinger, that by now he notices that no key decision maker will consider cyber to be somewhat in the secondary category. This also means noblesse oblige for the key decision makers, both on the, I would say emphatically, key decision makers not only in the public sector but also in the private sector and in the sector of the NGOs. We have to get our acts together, and the metaphor or the analogy to what has happened with regard to, for instance, space and satellite communication and the way in which we consider the space to be part of our humankind instead of state specifically is quite something to consider. A third point is having talked about what we call in the vocabulary the multi-stakeholders approach, which a lot of countries indeed adhere to. I would also say that this multi-stakeholders approach should not only be used to counter threats and to increase our security, but also, of course, for the better side to the story, for all those advantages which we can benefit from on the internet and through mobile communication. If we really take seriously the fact that by now in the developing world, in the developing countries, the coverage of mobile phone communication is 90%. If we do understand by now that some countries in the world which were in utter poverty are really increasing their economic situation also through the internet, there is also a very positive and optimistic side to it. And there, of course, we fall back to the easy story, but easy as difficult as it is at the same time, of balancing the pros and cons and keeping in mind what we call the triangle of openness on the internet, the secure internet, and the possibilities for economic growth and social development involved. Thank you so much for your attention. Thanks to the panel for the wonderful interventions they made on this very difficult subject.
Thank you.